So, should Canadians be concerned? Probably, because if they're actively talking about some sort of legal action, we can probably expect to see that in some sort of upcoming bill. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot do a video while in Alberta without showing you that beautiful Alberta sky in the background, as well as the beautiful Alberta landscape. But that's not the subject of our video. The government is intending or thinking about actually suing Canadians based on what they post online and whether they declare it as misinformation or disinformation. Let's take a look. From Blacklock's reporter, would sue over social posts. Industry Minister Melanie Joly's department, in an access to information memo, contemplates, quote, legal action, end quote, against users on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and other social media sites it suspects of spreading, quote, false and misleading information, end quote. The censored 35-page memo did not explain what action federal lawyers would take. Quote, this strategy seeks to uphold the integrity of and public trust in government information, end quote, said the March 31st memo disclosed yesterday. The, quote, objective of the strategy is to establish a plan that will prevent, detect, and respond to false or misleading information, end quote, it said. Managers, quote, already monitor the department's official social media channels and media outlets on a daily basis for comments and recurring inaccuracies, end quote, said the memo, misinformation and disinformation strategy. New measures will be used to, quote, transition from a reactive stance to one that is focused on prevention and early detection, end quote, it said. Quote, this will enable the department to proactively address false and misleading information, end quote, said the document. Social media platforms were considered, quote, channels where misinformation related to the department's mandate is most likely to appear or spread, end quote. The department itself would determine whether social media posts were, quote, factually incorrect, misleading, or out of context, end quote. Any punitive measures against individuals would be, quote, proportionate and subject to senior level approval, end quote. The memo acknowledged a risk of, quote unquote, further backlash, noting that targeting individuals could generate unwanted publicity. Quote, responding to misinformation can unintentionally amplify it by increasing visibility or lending legitimacy to fringe sources, end quote, said the memo, advice to the deputy minister. Quote, this risk also applies in the department's environment, where even acknowledging certain false claims on topics such as national security decisions, investment reviews, or artificial intelligence governance can draw broader public attention, end quote. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a screenshot of part of the access to information request that was actually cited in the article. And you can see where it has coordinated government response, and it has legal actions, and most of that is actually blacked out. Why would it be blacked out? Why does the government not want us to see what legal actions they would potentially take to Canadians that are participating in what they define as misinformation or disinformation? This is the main concern that the article is attempting to draw on. So, as the article talks about, this is a fairly concerning report for Canadians, because if the government is actively, and I mean actively, this report was from a briefing note from March 31st, 2026. So this is Carney's government, to be sure. And if they're actively considering taking legal action, but not specifying what that legal action is, that should concern Canadians. And shouldn't we know what legal action they are actually considering taking as well? Hopefully this might land in a committee somewhere, not in camera, so Canadians can actually understand what is going on. Now, this isn't the first time that the government has actually been talking about this, because we actually found a report that Justin Trudeau paid Frank Graves ECOS to actually do and study what would be the response to Canadians if they were to engage in certain advertisement ads to talk about disinformation and misinformation. So here's that. Now, this isn't new, because back in 2023, we actually have this report that is publicly available, and you can find the link in the description. It says, Study on Online Disinformation Advertising Creative Testing. Focus Group Report. The supplier name was Ecos Research Associates, so the government was actually paying Frank Graves ECOS research to actually do this focus group study. And this is what it says. This public opinion research report presents the results of focus groups conducted by ECOS research associates on behalf of Communications Security Establishment. The research was conducted in October 2023. Campaign background. Budget 2022 states that, quote, issues ranging from COVID-19 to climate change and increasingly confrontational authoritarian regimes demand the attention of Canada and our allies. The spread of misinformation and disinformation is directly challenging the stability of even the most long-standing democracies. Budget 2022 recognizes those challenges and proposes new action to respond to them. It commits to reinforcing global democracy, to combating illicit financing, and to pushing back against the forces of disinformation and misinformation that threaten public institutions around the world, end quote. While both misinformation and disinformation involve the sharing of false information, disinformation is maliciously and intentionally spread. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity also recognizes malinformation and defines the term as follows. Misinformation refers to false information that is not intended to cause harm. Disinformation refers to false information intended to manipulate, cause damage, or guide people, organizations, and countries in the wrong direction. Malinformation refers to information that stems from the truth but is often exaggerated in a way that misleads and causes potential harm. Misinformation and fake news appear to spread comparatively quickly through social media channels due to the content's novelty and capacity to elicit emotional responses. Once a user's preference for misinformation or fake news is established, algorithms may direct people to similar content and encourage them to travel down a quote-unquote rabbit hole of misinformation and fake news. The spread of disinformation specifically reduces the government's effectiveness in providing Canadians with programs and services. When disinformation centers around vaccine safety, the COVID-19 pandemic, the Canadian democratic process, or climate change, it undermines government efforts to protect its citizens with respect to those issues. The Communications Security Establishment will continue its advertising campaign to educate Canadians on what disinformation is, while also increasing awareness of who creates it and why they do it. The ads will feature a strong call to action that directs individuals to the campaign landing page where they can learn more about disinformation. This series of focus groups were conducted to test reactions to 3 different proposed concepts for intended use in the campaign and to assess which concepts and approaches are most appropriate for the target audiences. The information gained through this public opinion research will be shared throughout the CSE to assist it when developing communications, products, and strategies. Like the strategy that Blacklocks was actually reporting on. Specifically, the research was used to evaluate how the target audience responds to creative concepts for the online disinformation advertising campaign, including the creative captures the attention of participants, the creative is perceived as well produced, how likely the participants would be to visit canada.ca/online disinformation. Now, this is important because this is where we actually get to some of the feedback of this campaign from this focus group. Most participants supported the intended advertising campaign by the Government of Canada to encourage Canadians to be aware of disinformation and direct them to tools and resources to identify disinformation. A number of participants expressed reservations about the government presenting itself as an quote-unquote authority on disinformation. These participants perceived that the Government of Canada would be declaring what is true or not, or cautioned that an authoritative tone would reduce the likelihood that some Canadians would go to or use the website to learn more. Many emphasized the need for neutral, nonpartisan presentation of examples for what to look for or how to fact-check, being careful not to use this as an opportunity to further an agenda. A few felt the campaign may not be effective for those who were already deep into disinformation and will not heed any messaging put forward by the Government of Canada on this topic. These individuals may only look for information that validates their beliefs. Others felt they are already astute on identifying disinformation, and the campaign would not be relevant to them. So, no kidding, there's going to be Canadians that are concerned that the government is going to be the ones that get to be the arbiters of truth. And this has been the main concern with bills like C9, bills like C22, and all of the other censorship bills that are starting to come about. And You know, these are the ones that have stemmed off of the previous government's Bill C-63. So, should Canadians be concerned? Probably, because if they're actively talking about some sort of legal action, we can probably expect to see that in some sort of upcoming bill. Now, when it comes to legal action, it all depends on what is actually in this bill, because in current law, and we know a little bit about that because we just went through a legal proceeding, when it comes to posting things online, one of the main avenues that people can take to combat that is defamation. So, there's many defenses to defamation, and the main three are public interest, fair comment, and truth. So let's start with truth. If what you're saying online can be proven to be true, you have nothing to worry about in terms of the law. Second one, public interest. Is this a matter of public interest? So you can be commenting on something, you can have an opinion, it may be wrong or incorrect, but if it's still in the matter of the public interest discussion, you can be protected under the law. The last one is fair comment. Fair comment is similar to public interest, but you're essentially having a public debate on something, you're fairly commenting on it, you're trying to adhere to truth, and you're trying to adhere to what is actually out in the public domain when it comes to discussing particular topics. So, in terms of fair comment, I can say that Francois Philippe Champagne is short, and that is true. I can say that he's annoying. That's a matter of fair comment. That's an opinion. And public interest, because I'm talking about a public figure that has demonstrably stepped into a public serving position, it opens him up to a wide breadth of public scrutiny. So, as it relates to defamation and publishing things online, those are the defenses right now, and many of them are pretty starchly held in terms of the courts in Canada. But when it comes to this type of thought by the government, they want to sue people for things that they say online, whether it's misinformation or disinformation. Canadians should understandably be concerned, and we should understandably be asking the question, what do you mean, Melanie Joly, when your department specifically says legal action when you're talking about pursuing punishment for Canadians based on what their opinion is online? And what do you mean when you get to decide what is true and what is not?